So for our next panel, we're going to bring on some panelists who've been dealing with the hype cycle, who've been dealing with technologies, and it's one of the things that, again, there's an intersection, I believe, between AI and blockchain. I'm an expert in AI, so when I see AI hype, my brain hurts, and I'm sure those of you who are experts in blockchain, when you see the hype around that, your brain hurts too. But let's bring on the panelists. So first of all, Alison is going to be coming back. We've known Alison this morning.
I'll take this one here.
She's the president and the CEO of the spectacularly named Foresight Institute, so we definitely need some foresight, so thanks, Alison. And next up, we've got Colleen McKenzie, and Colleen is a researcher, designer, and product strategist, and her goal is really in exploring and improving humans' interactions with technology. So thank you, Colleen. Next up is Jonathan. Jonathan Passerat-Pombach is a senior research scientist at Flashbots. And what he's really exploring is the application of privacy-enhancing technologies to solve hard problems such as decentralized collaborative learning. So thank you and welcome, Jonathan. And then finally is my good friend Nikita Namjoshi, also from Google. Nikita is a cloud developer advocate, and she's forgotten more about cloud technology than most of us will ever know in our lives. So welcome, Nikita. So I'm going to start the panel really just with all of the guests. I'd just like to ask, what has your experience been in dealing with hype and being able to cut through hype? Maybe start with Colleen.
Sure. So I think the most potent result of the hype cycle, from my perspective, as somebody working in AI safety, AI alignment, and ethical and responsible use of AI, is the way it creates a kind of black and white thinking around the future. People think that either all of the hype is true and we're going to live in this glorious utopia where all of the menial labor is automated by machines who don't care about it, or civilizational collapse or something approximating that, or other dystopias. And so I think that divergence would be lesser if some of the hype were a little bit toned down or even more concrete instead of abstract picture painting.
Okay, how about Nikita?
The last few months living through this kind of rise of generative AI has been such an amazing case study and hype. It's hard to imagine there was a time where I didn't hear the phrase LLM or large language model like 50 times a day. But I think one thing that's been really interesting is seeing kind of the importance of education and how, a year ago, these were topics that not that many people really understood or knew much about. And the more we are able to educate and teach people, we bring more people into the fold. And I think when we do that, the industry kind of changes definitely for the better.
Mm-hmm. How about Peter?
Yeah, I think I would second what you just said. I think the common thing with all the hype cycle is that, of course, everyone comes in. There's a lot of demand for new teaching material, and I think that's the only positive that usually stays out of it. It's sorting out the not so good things about it, but at least bringing in more people who are genuinely interested and creating more documentation and onboarding material for the next cycles of innovations.
Sorry, I meant Jonathan.
That's all right.
And then Alison, with Foresight Institute, what is your foresight on how it be on this?
Sometimes when I go back into archives, it's all hell breaks loose because we also focus on molecular nanotechnology. And so back in the days, it was called nanotechnology. Then it had to be renamed to molecular nanotechnology because many people claimed the word nanotechnology for things that really weren't actually atomically precise. And I think you see the same with AI, right? Back in the days, it was AI. Now you have to say AGI if you mean generally intelligent systems. And so you have to kind of reclaim back the more long-term goals that have been then eaten up by more short-term, let's say folks that just want to put on a PowerPoint slide when they're when they're pitching. And I think that's one interesting bit that you just see through the history of technology development. And I think the hype cycle is an interesting one to think about. And another interesting one also, especially for the long-term goals, is this kind of S-curve. Where we're always making some progress, then people get really unexcited about it again. Everything was just total failure, but then it's still kind of gradually moving along. And I think especially as more of the technologies will be converging, perhaps these kind of the S slopes will be like a little bit steeper and faster. But I think ultimately to break through the hype cycle, it would be great to have things like prediction markets or something where people can actually like, or even, just like, let's say like, actually like oracles, or like where people can actually just like lock their bets of where they think a specific technology will be. So we can verify, like we can actually follow up on this. And Metaculous is a great one there, but like there's plenty of others out there.
Okay, cool. And I always like to use an example of a technology that fails the hype cycle. Who remembers Google Glass? All right, now we think about Google Glass for a moment and think about what really happened there. Okay, like, we can maybe tell the narrative of like, you have this thing hanging on your face and it looks silly and it looks dorky. But if you ever used one, it was actually really, really useful. I ride bikes a lot, and I used to love to have mine on while I was riding my bike, because then when my family was chatting with me, we have a WhatsApp family chat, I could actually see the notifications instead of hearing my phone buzz, and then like having to stop bike riding, take out my phone, take a look at it. I could see things appearing. It was amazing, and it was really, really useful. But it failed the hype cycle. When you think about it, the hype cycle begins with this peak of inflated expectations. And how many people here actually ever used the Google Glass out of interest? One. Two. One at the back as well. So, three. Okay. A little ashamed to admit it at first, right? But so it's like when you've actually used one of them, first of all, when you see that hype cycle, the negative news stories around this kind of thing, there were people being beaten up in bars in San Francisco, movie theaters were banning them lest you like record the movie. But if you've ever actually used one, like particularly to record video, it would last for about 15 minutes before it burned your ear off, and it just wasn't suited for a lot of the scenarios that people were telling negative stories about it. And we did a really bad job dragging people along the hype cycle, giving them, proper scenarios that they could use and they could succeed with this. And of course, the product went to die. And we're littered with countless, as an industry, with countless products that have died because they didn't get beyond the hype cycle. How many of you use an Apple Watch? Right? A lot more hands in the room, but when you think about it, the scenarios are exactly the same. Okay, it's a notification engine that's now on your wrist instead of on your ear, but it was launched at a different time, it was a different form factor, and it was able to get beyond the hype cycle. And that's what I'm really interested in, like hearing from our panelists. Like, do you have any anecdotes of maybe where you've succeeded getting beyond the hype cycle, or maybe even ones that are notable failures? Any thoughts from any of you? I use the easy one with Google Glass. I've given you the hard one, sorry.
Well, I have one maybe I think it's still, there's some kind of disconnect. For example, when you talk, I think people at crypto, given that you guys are here, you're really interested in AI and in figuring out how you guys can help, or how you can use AI also for crypto applications. But oftentimes I feel like in AI communities, there is a lot of perhaps like skepticism towards crypto, like given, some of the, NFT and so forth. The past few years that we've all lived through. And so I think it's actually a little bit harder really to kind of like convince those folks that there is like a value in crypto. And with crypto, I don't just mean Web3, but also cryptography and the security communities that are like often kind of like, immersed in this. And I think the only time when I kind of like saw a change in that is, a bit that I pointed out yesterday as well, with Google launching its cybersecurity grants program, and with many people in AI safety becoming much, much more aware of info security, which is something that people in I think security and crypto community have been knowing for a long, long time, that security is like paramount. And I think this kind of like waking up to this fact, like gradually, I think that's one thing where it's not necessarily a success story, but at least it's like where I feel like finally a message is getting through, and there's finally like a bridge to connect the two fields and to make some progress or something.
And then you've touched on something there, and I think Nikita and Jonathan touched on it earlier on, that education is very, very important. Any thoughts on like what we should be doing as an industry to really educate people in not just the possibilities of AI or blockchain, but also the realities? Any thoughts from?
Well, I think this kind of events is perfect. It's like bringing together the two communities. Like what Alison was saying was, and I think we agree. Like you were talking about the hype cycle. Somebody's hype is another person's job, maybe. And in AI versus blockchain, that's what we see. Like we see the AI people from the outside perceiving like a lot of things from the Web3 community as like just hype and like, people trying to sell tokens for nothing. But whatever you think about that, behind the scenes, there's like actual tech being built that could be used and being transferred to the other field. So the question is like, how do you bring these people? Like, how do you incentivize them to just like go past the veil of what they consider hype and like dive deep into the actual technology proposal? And I think it's about aligning the mental models, like syncing the mental models between the two communities by bringing people together in the same room. Is it by doing panels? Is it by doing conferences? Is it like hackathons where you bring people together? I think what Foresight does, this kind of like workshops where they try to bring different communities together, is excellent too. So maybe it's just like a bit of everything to get these like two communities together. Absolutely.
How about Nikita? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think something that's been very interesting about generative AI is previously with education and machine learning, I've been thinking a lot about how do I communicate this to a developer or a software engineer? And with generative AI, it's been a lot about how do I communicate this in a way that my mother would understand, my friends who don't do anything in tech would understand, because it's been so immediate with ChatGPT. And so a lot of what I've been thinking about is just how to distill something very complicated and confusing, and that seems like there's a huge barrier to entry, but how do you make it very clear in a way that somebody can understand exactly what this technology is doing, what it's not doing, and like what those kind of common analogies are to help somebody understand, which is a completely different audience to what I think a lot of us have been used to when we're teaching about these different topics in tech.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts, Colleen?
Yeah, I'd add to that, kind of riffing on your better conceptual models shared among more people, that one thing I see stymieing progress in that direction is anthropomorphizing LLMs all over the place. So there are some decent analogies that don't do that. There's LLMs are stochastic parrots. They just probabilistically repeat things. There's GPT is a lossy JPEG of the internet in your article. But I think that people are going to find anthropomorphizing analogies most at hand when they're trying to think about like what kind of thing can generate language. Mm-hmm. And I actually think that anybody working in crypto or blockchain has a little bit of an edge on finding a different route to looking for analogies that might be helpful, because everyone in that space is used to very complex emergent behavior arising from what are actually very simple algorithms at the end of the day. And in a sense, what LLMs are like too.
Okay. I think I want a T-shirt of that GPT is the lossy JPEG of the internet. We should get
not
those
the parrot.
I don't like the stochastic parrot one, but I do like the lossy JPEG one. So, I always like to share a story. Like for me, that one thing that I experienced in really understanding how people can tunnel through hype and begin to get understanding was I worked on this really fun project about 2 years ago. And anybody know the TV show Stargate? Any fans? Or Stargate Atlantis in particular? Okay, so there was an actor in Stargate Atlantis, David Hewlett. He played Dr. McKay. So they were having like the 25th anniversary of the show, but the show had been bought by Amazon from MGM, and what they wanted to do was gather all the cast together for the 25th anniversary to create like an original episode. But because of the contractual stuff between MGM and Amazon, Brad Wright, the creator of it, wasn't able to write a TV show. He just simply wasn't allowed to do it. So he was like, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could get an AI to write one? And I had previously consulted on the TV shows, so Brad and I connected. And this was before ChatGPT came out, so it's 2021. And I created a mini transformer model. So if you know GPT, the T stands for transformer. It's generative pre-trained transformers. And I created a small transformer model, no way near as sophisticated as ChatGPT. Trained it on like 330 scripts from the TV show and had it create these original scripts. And because it's a very small model, it created a lot of gibberish and it created a lot of garbage. And we had the actors get together and have them try to read through the garbage. And it was very, very funny. If you go onto YouTube, you'll find it. But the reason why I bring it up was that all of these actors were very afraid of AI to begin with. They were terrified that it's going to replace their likeness, it's going to replace their voice. And we've probably seen it, you may have seen the story like in the last couple of days that Tom Hanks is saying apparently somebody's selling dental stuff or something like that using his likeness. So these actors were correct in being afraid of that. So by working with them, one-on-one, and by educating them, I was able to teach them what was possible and what isn't possible. And the reason why I bring up one of these actors, David, who Dr. Rodney McKay in the show, You know, as he was reading through the scripts and as he was trying to chew up all of this technobabble that was spat out by the AI, he suddenly had an idea. And he told me a story that he's not an A-list actor, he's not Tom Cruise or anything like that, and sometimes it's hard for him to find a job. And so he has to go and he has to do auditions and he has to do all these kind of things. And when you're doing auditions, they give you technobabble that you have to read. And he, generally goes in blind, has to try and audition for these kind of things, and it's really difficult for him to do that. And he's like, wait a minute, you have this AI that's running on your desktop that can spit out these scripts with this technobabble. People like me would buy that. Now, suddenly, he had gone beyond these inflated expectations, and he knew the limitations of the AI, and he started ideating, starting a new business for people like him. And one of the things that we have in the AI community, and maybe similarly in the chain community, is that we have these closed communities, right? Within AI, we've got a lot of people who know AI, but we don't do very well at interfacing with the outside world. And when the technology was exposed to somebody who's not a technologist, in this case was an actor, and they were able to understand that thoroughly, then they were able to ideate, and they were able to think of an entirely new scenario that had never been thought of before. So that's why I'm really passionate about everything that you've been sharing about education, that, let's bring people together, not just experts, but also experts working with outsiders, and see, what is it that we can do to kind of spark the magic from their domain knowledge to be able to extend what we do so that they can all do better. And any thoughts on that kind of thing from the panel? Any opportunities there that you can think of, or?
Complete agreement. I do think that there is huge potential in just collecting the information we have so far in a central place that's easy for somebody who's trying to onboard themselves to reference in a way that is not happening as a result of how fast the field is moving compared to technological advances in the past. So something like a suite of, say, oracles that were referencing information about certain domains of AI in a way that was referenceable by other people trying to create those kind of educational materials, I think would be really powerful.
I mean, even talk to the city is a case in point of how you educate.
Well,
people, right?
It just so happens that the AI Objectives Institute where I work is currently pursuing a project like this with a collective intelligence platform that we've built, which is all about aggregating, synthesizing, and clustering information. But we're still looking for those data inputs because information is just coming from so many places in so many unstructured fashions. So it's coming together.
It's also about the way you consume the information, I guess, too. It's it's one thing to bring it all together, and you could say that the LLM is probably a very good tool to just bring this information together, condense it in sort of a black box. But then, what you want to use the LLM for, maybe, and that's where chatbots could be nice, is that exposing a different interface to the various people, requesting information out of it. Maybe an AI expert wanting to learn about blockchain is not going to ask the same questions than someone who's already into AI and who's going to ask different questions to get a deeper understanding of what's going on. So if you have these repositories of information condensed in a form that you can not just consult but query in your own syllabus, depending on where you are in your state of understanding, that could be a good tool as well to again share mental models, I think.
So often when we're caught within the hype cycle, we can be afraid to share, right? So it's think about with AI in healthcare, for example, there's so many possibilities, but people are terrified to share. So some of these scenarios you're thinking of, and the trust and verifiability that Chain gives you, can encourage people to share more. Just have you had any experience with that, or any have you seen where people are more likely to open up because something is on chain?
Not really because something is on chain, I would say. I think even I've been working on privacy preserving text for a while, and I think I don't really believe anymore that people are genuinely moved by the fact that you provide them with privacy or no privacy. I mean, I think the type of interactions we have on social media and things are definitely show that it's not a critical feature apparently. What's more interesting, I think, is that what use cases can you unlock with these new features? Mm-hmm. Things you can't do if you didn't have privacy, for example. So if I don't give you these guarantees, maybe there's legislations in your country that even prevent you from interacting with me. And sharing in this sense can mean many things. It can mean sharing the raw data all the way down to sharing the signal that you've extracted from it. So it's It's like a spectrum of like what you can and cannot share. But to me, it's really about what new things you can do, what new partnerships and collaborations you can unlock with these privacy preserving technologies, rather than, oh, what new users can I onboard just because I do the same thing, but it's now privacy preserving.
So I know, I see from your bio that one of the things that you work on is federated learning.
Yeah.
Is that connected with
Absolutely.
that in any ways?
Yeah. No, I think that's the, and you know, it's like a very good example, because initially the hype of federated learning started. I mean, you know, thanks to you guys at Google, that was great. No, that's good. Like I lived from that, so thank you. But everyone started to talk about federated learning as a privacy preserving technology, and it's not. It's just a way for, it's a governance technology. It's a way for like different institutions or clients to get better control on what you do with the data, but it doesn't give you any privacy guarantee per se, right? It's complementary with privacy preserving technologies. But it's really the fact that, you know, it's again going back to how do you sell a technology, how do you educate people? And if you start talking and equating FL with privacy, of course everyone is going to repeat it. And we've got the same thing in the Web3 world. Everyone talks about ZK, but in most cases, what they mean is like proof, snark, not the ZK part, just like the compression mechanism and the verifiability. So really like the memes that you start spreading about a technology at the very beginning are extremely powerful. So that's something we need to know how to do better, I think, because like when you start spreading these memes, they just go, and you can't control them anymore.
Sure. I mean, that there are all those memes that in the AI industry that, you know, the sci-fi movie industry has been spreading them for decades, that, you know, Terminators are on the way and all that kind of stuff. So we're fighting an uphill battle against that. And I think, you know, Chain is sometimes fighting an uphill battle against some of the misbehavior by some individuals that I won't name. But, you know, so it's like, it's really interesting to think about how do you fight against that level of meme? How do you turn the tide away from it? Any thoughts? Or anybody experienced with doing anything like that?
Well, I do think it's interesting to think about, like, I think almost the kind of like crypto and AI intersection has like 3 different categories or something, in the sense that there's one, how can kind of like crypto help secure AI? And I think there's lots of opportunities in InfoSec and better alignment strategies and better coordination strategies and so forth. Then I think the second one is, you know, kind of like what new applications could be unlocked really by the intersection between crypto and AI. And I think they're like, you know, you guys are doing really incredible work, really on the privacy end. But then I think the third one that we also kind of like have to think about is the one that Ari also mentioned of like, are there new risks, you know, that really could be arising by like pairing up crypto and AI? And I think that I remember reading your, what was it, the AI DAO, Woolly DAOs, Medium post, I don't know when, like 5 years ago or something, longer maybe. Then Ali Yahya wrote a post on decentralized autonomous hive minds when you said A16Z, and Fred Erzam wrote one on, I think it was privacy preserving private machine learning marketplaces on the blockchain. And, you know, I think once you have these kind of like autonomous hive minds that start forming, where perhaps like it's AI algorithms that reward local contributors for their local data, perhaps they're even privacy preserving, so people can actually like, you know, kind of like collaborate on their like specific healthcare cases or something. That's great, but you could also imagine that, you know, could be like autonomous assassination markets or something. So I think this kind of like classification of individual kind of like promises and perils, and like being pretty like sane about them. And I guess in our community, often in the Bay Area, they talk about DTD, like differential technology development, which means like when you see like a new field emerging or the intersection of a field, it's sometimes useful, and not always possible, but at least useful thought exercise to look at, are there any technologies that could be differentially accelerated vis-a-vis other technologies that could be safety and security enhancing. So for example, you know, like first perhaps like really push on like security before you have AI or something. Like, and there are often these, I think, opportunities, and I think being kind of clear about where they are and where they're emerging in this new intersection would be really interesting, because I think otherwise people will get really scared about the intersection between crypto and AI, and perhaps rightfully so. So I think like pointing out really tangible use cases, but also where potential risks are, how we could address them, I think is could be a really good path forward that is really difficult to tread, but would be useful to do, I think.
So I think one of the ways that can be done is like, it's cautionary tales are great. and it's cautionary tales are the kind of thing that we had one from Ari earlier on, which was kind of a fun one with Pink Panther. I love those movies, by the way. But it's like, as well as cautionary tales, I think we should also be thinking about more realistic tales so that we can like motivate people to understand what it's possible that they can actually do in a positive way, like my story with David and, you know, and him being able to kind of come up with a whole new business idea. And I know, Nikita, you're working really heavily with like Google Cloud and with generative stuff in Google Cloud. And, you know, I'm wondering, like, you know, what do you think of, like, you know, are there good positive stories that we could be telling here, you know, alongside with the cautionary tales?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of boring use cases. Like I feel like when we go talk about generative AI and large language models, we want to talk about all these crazy exciting stories and it gets everybody really animated and interested. But like at the end of the day, I think one of the most interesting, useful use cases for large language models is just like taking data in one format and turning it into another format. It's very boring, but it solves so many problems. And so like a lot of the startups and companies that I've been talking with recently, we've just been looking at like, they have a ton of different data sources, and right now they've got a bunch of really brittle, you know, hand-coded rules trying to parse the data and put it into another format. And we can do that like beautifully with large language models. And it's not very exciting. You're just turning data from one format to another. But like I think I really have seen people get very animated when you show them something so simple that's so valuable. It's not the most exciting, but I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah, I think that's the second T-shirt we need out of this panel. Is never underestimate the boring use cases, right? So,
exactly.
Embrace the boring.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I think one of the things that I've found is that when people understand the boring use cases, that's when they really begin to understand the technology. Yeah. I like another story I like to tell is that you may have seen recently in the news there was a Hollywood writers' strike. And the writer's strike just thankfully recently ended and things can start going back into production again. But if you understand what actually happened to lead to this strike, there was really two things. Number one, there was a lot of writers upset about new revenue streams, like from streaming and all of that kind of stuff that they weren't tapping into. And the other one was AI. But when you see what was the argument that was having about AI, it was like both sides really didn't understand what it was about. And then both sides were fearful of the possibilities of the other side using it. And as a result, that tore them apart instead of bringing them together. Thankfully, they came together. It took 5 months. I wish it had taken less time. But you know, thankfully, they were able to come together and they have a new solution. And Colleen, like I see you work on humane technology and like thinking about it in terms like humane technology. And that's one of the things that like when I was thinking about this panel and I was thinking about you, is like, what ways can we think of like, you know, being able to help people not be driven by fear, you know, and to have technology used in humane ways?
Yeah. To me, it's largely a technology governance problem, and not governance in terms of state actors, but governance in terms of people being able to give input about what they want the technology doing for them in a way that we don't really have the capability to right now for, you know, the Facebook or Twitter news feeds, or for a lot of the other ways that we're presented with information. So I think both for current technology and for any increasingly capable AI we see in the future, one of the really key things that we're going to need to like get the glorious utopia is for people to be able to directly talk about from their own perspective with their own frame what they want from that technology. And the technology to synthesize all that information is also going to be key. I think AI can help, and I think DAOs are probably where a lot of that's going to be incubated because they're distributed already.
So there may be a whole bunch of boring use cases there that make everything
so many
better.
boring use cases to talk about. Yeah.
How about everybody else? I mean, what